The breathing tube made it impossible to scream, which was probably a mercy. If I could have spoken in that moment, watching my parents gather their coats to leave me alone after emergency surgery, I might have said things that couldn't be taken back. Instead, I blinked once for yes when Dad patted my hand and told me to be a good sister. A good sister, while my intestines were still figuring out how to work again after being emergency resectioned, while monitors tracked my unstable vitals, while I was scared and in pain and couldn't even ask for water. Tyler's team made playoffs, Mom explained as if that justified everything. This could be his shot at a scholarship, you understand? I understood perfectly. I'd understood for 23 years. Tyler's football games, Tyler's grades, Tyler's needs, they always came first. My appendix had ruptured during my shift at the veterinary clinic. I'd driven myself to the ER. I called my parents from the waiting room. They showed up just in time to sign consent forms before the doctors wheeled me into surgery. And now they were leaving for a football game. The nurse found me crying an hour later. Tears slid silently down my face and pooled in my ears because I couldn't move enough to wipe them away. She adjusted the IV line and glanced toward the empty chair beside my bed. "Where's your family, sweetheart?" I pointed to my throat, then mimed writing. She brought me a small whiteboard. I wrote 2 words, "Brother's game." Her face went through several expressions before settling into professional neutrality. "I see." Then she asked softly, "Are they coming back tonight?" I hesitated, then wrote another sentence. "Depends if they win." She didn't laugh. Instead, she pulled a chair closer to my bed. "My shift ends in 6 hours," she said quietly. "I'll stay with you until then." That small kindness broke something inside me. I scribbled quickly on the board. "You don't have to. I'm used to it." She read it, then shook her head. "That," she said gently, "is exactly why I have to." The next 2 days passed in a blur of pain medication and silence. Hospitals are strange places when you're alone. You start noticing things, the sound of family members laughing in the hallway, the way other patients had visitors rotating every few hours, someone bringing soup, someone adjusting pillows, someone holding their hand when the pain got bad. Across the hall from me, an elderly man had 3 daughters who practically took shifts caring for him. They argued about who got to stay overnight. Meanwhile, my room stayed empty, except for nurses, and sometimes the quiet one named Elena, who brought me extra ice chips even when it wasn't technically allowed. My parents texted, but not about me. Mom sent updates about Tyler's game. They won. Tyler scored twice. Scouts were there tonight. No one asked how I was doing. Not once. By the time the breathing tube finally came out on the second day, my throat felt like sandpaper. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. The first thing I said wasn't hello. It wasn't thank you. It was 5 quiet words. "I need to make calls." The nurse looked hopeful. "Family?" I shook my head. "Lawyer." She blinked, but she didn't question it. Instead, she brought me my phone and stepped outside to give me privacy. The first call was to my boss. Dr. Amanda Hensley answered immediately. "Skylar? Oh my God, we've been worried sick. What happened?" "Appendix ruptured," I croaked. A pause. "Are you okay?" "Barely." I swallowed painfully. "Listen, is that clinic position in Seattle still open?" Another pause. "I thought you didn't want to move away from family." I stared at the empty hospital chair beside me. "Things change." Silence hung on the line for a moment. Then she said something that nearly made me cry. "It's yours if you want it." The next few hours were a blur of phone calls. My landlord, a moving company, my bank. I opened new accounts, transferred my savings, and started quietly untangling my life from theirs. It wasn't a dramatic decision. It was more like a switch flipping, a realization that had been building for years. This wasn't the first time they'd left me behind. When I was 15, they'd forgotten to pick me up after wisdom teeth surgery because Tyler had practice that afternoon. When I graduated college, they left early from the ceremony because Tyler had a regional playoff game. Every memory followed the same pattern. Tyler first, me later, or never. The surgery just made it impossible to ignore anymore. They finally showed up on day 3. Mom carried a bouquet of flowers from the hospital gift shop. Dad looked tired, like he'd been busy. Tyler wasn't with them. "How are you feeling?" Mom asked carefully, sitting on the edge of the visitor chair. "Like someone who had surgery alone." Dad frowned. "We weren't gone that long." "You've been gone 72 hours. Mom waved her hand dismissively. "Well, Tyler's team advanced to state. It's a huge deal." Of course it was. Everything involving Tyler was. I slowly adjusted the hospital bed so I could sit up. It hurt, but I needed to look them in the eye. "What about my future?" They exchanged a look, the same look they'd given me my entire life, the one that said I was being dramatic, selfish, difficult. Dad cleared his throat. "You have a good job here. Why would anything change?" "I'm moving to Seattle." The silence was instant. Mom blinked. "What?" "I'm moving. 2 weeks." Dad laughed like I had told a joke. "You can't just move across the country." "Watch me." Mom's voice sharpened. "What about family dinners? What about supporting your brother? I tilted my head. What about me? Neither of them answered, because for the first time in my life, they didn't have an excuse ready.